So in this video, I'm going to talk about doing press releases to launch a book or for authors. So if you're an author and you're trying to get the word out about your book, you might be thinking about doing a press release. Generally, I don't recommend doing that. And the reason is because publishing a book isn't news. So if you're just publishing a book, this author has published a new book about this topic, that's not really news, unless it ties into something that is more actionable that actually happened. So if you just put out a press release that says, hey, this guy published a book, most news journalists aren't going to pick that up for their platforms because it's not really that interesting. So if that's all you want to do, you'd have to at least tie it into something. You'd have to tie it into an organization or something, but it also has to be real. Publishing a book isn't news. It's not worthy of taking up space in a newspaper. There's millions of people publishing a book. You have to actually do something that is interesting and engaging, that readers will care about, that will pique their interest. So I'm going to give you two examples of ways that I'm doing that, and I'm helping my friend Alyssa Amore, who's a best-selling author, distribute a press release. So there are services that you can write your press release. There's a way to do it, and I'll link to some resources down below. But there's ways to format your press release and send it out to a press release distribution service. Ideally, the reason that you might want to do it is because if your article gets on a whole bunch of other websites, even if it's the online version, just getting on that website, you can say you've been featured on that news site. So I don't really keep track, but if one of my pieces of content makes it to a really big site, for example, we got featured in CNN last year for the castle retreat that I rented, that's a really cool credibility booster because I can put that on my website, and I do from now on. Whenever I talk about myself or my platform, I can say Derek Murphy has been featured in CNN for holding a writing retreat in a castle. That's a nice little soundbite, and CNN is a really reputable source of news, even though it's not the TV CNN or the magazine. It's just the website that still kind of counts, and it's a good piece of credibility. So you want to be producing some kind of a news or some piece of content that's interesting enough that it gets shared by some of the bigger journals or newspapers. But even if it doesn't, just by submitting a press release, and this is why, like, normally I would wait and do a press release after you've seen some success with your book. But if you want to do it in the beginning, the reason to do it is because you can also get really nice backlinks. So if you have a piece of content or your website or your blog, and you have a really smart piece of news that you distribute with a press release, even if it doesn't get on any reputable sites, it could still get on a few hundred sites with pretty good traffic. And if you've constructed your press release well and you have a couple keyword anchor links, so for example, and this was, again, it'd be hard to do because if I wanted to promote, for example, my mermaid fantasy romance book, nothing I really talk about would be news. So I would have to do something physical. For example, there are mermaid schools where you can go and take classes in being a mermaid and put on like a mermaid tail and swim. So something that I could do, for example, would be buy out a whole class and give away like 10 free summer classes to this mermaid school. I would want it to be very specialized. So for example, when I did my first mermaid book, when I launched it, I was donating money to save manatee. And that's actually not a great piece of news because you can't, like, it's not news if you say I'm going to donate proceeds of my income from my book sales to some organization because you haven't sold any books yet. So just the fact that you're going to do it, that's not news yet. But after I did do it and I donated some money to save the manatee, then it's kind of a story. It wasn't a huge story because I didn't make tons of money on my first book launch. If I was able to raise like 10 grand to save the manatee, even that's not a huge amount of money, but it's still newsworthy enough. I think I donated 500 or something, which isn't a crazy amount of money. So it's not really big enough to be news or to talk about. And even if that's kind of nice, to be news, it would have to be more immediate and more graphic. There'd have to be a picture of it. So just donating money to save manatee isn't a big deal. I could have, for example, sponsored a bunch of low-income family who have children who want to become mermaids, and we could have all gone to the manatee park and learn to swim like mermaids with the manatee and take pictures and videos, that kind of thing. It's a huge endeavor. It probably wouldn't have been worth it in terms of ROI, but it has to be that kind of a thing. It has to be something really physical that you're actually doing to be newsworthy. And it has to be on a pretty big scale. So it's not really something I think is smart to start off with. Although if you could think of a good piece of content, like I said, it's just an easy way to get a lot of content out there that points back to you. So if I linked and I said like, Derek Murphy wrote a best-selling mermaid fantasy book, and I linked that phrase back to my website or to my book on Amazon, and then I also had a good story about swimming or mermaids or manatee or something like that, that could be a decent piece of content that gets strong backlinks to my site. So even if it doesn't get a lot of visibility or play, or it doesn't get a lot of actual readers, it can still really help get more traffic to my site, because it's showing the internet that there's all these links from news sites back to my website, which can be good. So you might want to think about some kind of a piece of content that you could publish early, even if it's not going to get a lot of readership, even if it's not really a big, exciting piece of news. But then the reason I'm waiting and putting it here in this section is because I really think it'll be more successful if you've accomplished something with your writing to help you get to that next level. So for example, the press release that I helped Elisa write, and she had something on her website already. I just tweaked it a little bit. Basically, she published the Touch Saga, and they're selling really well. She was selling well in Italy, but nobody wanted to, she couldn't get an agent or a publisher in America or England to take on the translation and the publication. So she paid for her own translation, and the books have done crazy well on Amazon. So I won't guess how much she's making. I know she's a six-figure. It says in the press release she's a six-figure author. So that really only means she's making about 10K a month on book sales, which I don't think is a crazy amount. I think that's, if your books are doing well and you have a series and you have 5 or 10 books out, I think that's a reasonable goal to get to, if you can get to 10K a month. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. Elisa, I'm sure, is there, and she's probably pretty far past that, actually. But the interesting thing, like just the fact that she published the book and that she's successful, that's not very interesting. That's not a news story. The interesting thing is that when she was writing the book, and there's two parts of this. One is that it's a rags to riches story, which is always captivating. So she started out, she wasn't able to afford a laptop, so her husband gave her a laptop, which is a great gift to kind of say, I believe in you and your writing, that she used to write her books. And then she was inspired by an actor. When she was thinking about the character, she had a specific actor in mind, and that was Matt Lanter. And Matt Lanter, I don't think he's not huge famous. I know him just because he was on a time travel show recently, which I don't remember the name of it right now. But he's a pretty big deal. And so she was able to, because she made 6 figures with her book, she was able to reach out and hire Matt Lanter to narrate the audiobooks of her story. That's pretty good news. That's a really good soundbite. Not only is it rags to riches, so it's inspiring to other authors, but it's really cool that she could just, like, she did something that nobody else had really thought of, which is just, rather than just going on ACX and hiring some audio producer, she hired the famous actor who had inspired her writing to narrate the audiobooks. So I felt that was really the critical piece of information in the press release. So that's what I put as the title of the press release: self-published author makes 6 figures and hires famous actor to narrate audiobooks. That's kind of the main story. And then in the byline, it says, this Italian novelist became one of the best-selling self-published authors in 2017. A few years ago, she couldn't afford a laptop. Now she's hired the famous actor who inspired her writing to narrate the audiobooks. So that's really the news, and then the rest of it is just details about the news. That's a really good piece of news. So we're using a press release distribution service, and I would expect that a lot of news agencies will pick that story up because it is a really good story. But it really couldn't happen. Like, it wouldn't be interesting unless she was successful, because nobody really cares about a rags to riches if it's not, if you don't have the riches, if you're not seeing some success. And also she did something new and interesting with a famous actor, proving that self-published authors can really do great things. So it's an inspiring story. The other thing that I'm going to do, and I don't really do much with press releases for myself, but one that I'll do later this year, and kind of one of the things I've been doing to build my brand, is to try to rent castles to use as writing retreats, like I mentioned earlier. So I probably won't do it forever, but the first time it was kind of hard because nobody really knew whether it was whether it could actually happen. A lot of people had their doubts about, I said I want to rent a castle and use it as a writing retreat, and a lot of people thought that was kind of a dumb idea that would never work out. But it did. It was hard the first year, and we did okay. I think it'll be easier this second year to get more traction and credibility. I'm going to partner with NaNoWriMo this year to give away a room in the castle. But the interesting piece that I didn't have before was I wasn't really making money with my fiction before. And this year, I had a good month where I made $8,000, which I don't make every month, but I launched a new book and I had a book on pre-order. So I made a lot that month. And so I could say I made enough money with my fiction in that month to rent this castle for a month. And it's this huge 12th century castle in Austria, which costs about $7,000 to rent and has, I think, room for like 12 people. I think there's probably like 6 or 7 bedrooms, but some of them have bunks or something. But so I can basically, I sold enough with my books to rent this castle. That's a very clear, transparent, inspiring message because I have the pictures. We can actually go there and take pictures and videos to make it look really cool. That I think will be a good story. So when I do a press release later this year, I'll focus on that, and that will really be my pitch. It will be, self-published author makes enough money to rent this castle for a month. That's something that it's very visual. I have pictures of the castle. I'll have pictures of my books, and indirectly, like it's not direct book marketing. It's just indirect. I won't even necessarily say how much money I made. I'll just say I made enough to rent the castle. People will probably be curious. They might come check me out or my website. I will probably link to like the author's website or whatever. You want to have a couple links. You don't want to have in your press release, you don't want to have lots of links because every link you put divides up the total power of the link juice. So if I have like 5 links, the power of those links is diminished. It's like divided by 5. So if I just have 2 links, each of those links is going to have more power. That's a little, the power stuff, it's a little hard to explain. But for example, if CNN links, if they republish my article, so my article is on their site, CNN's power is going to be linking back to my site. So I could either have it all going directly to one website, or I could split it up between 3 or 4 websites, but then it's not as strong. So that's something to keep in mind. You really just want 2 links about, and you probably want like a link to your website, and then you want a keyword phrase like best-selling self-published author, for example, or young adult mermaid fantasy romance. So there's some things to think about. You want to be thinking about maybe something to start off with just to get some links coming into your site for basic SEO purposes, but then also having a specific goal where you can succeed to a certain extent, where you can do something cool with the money that's very visible and very physical and very engaging and interesting. It captures people's attention. It's not exciting enough to even to say, self-published author makes a living writing. That's not cool enough anymore. You have to really do something specific and physical in the actual world, and hopefully do something that includes other people. So like with my castle thing, it's not just me living in a castle. I can give away rooms to NaNoWriMo, or I can give away rooms to my platform, which I've done before. So I can just invite other writers to come and live with me in my castle and write books. That's something that gets people really excited. It makes me look good because it's not just about me making money. If you just say, I made 6 figures writing fiction, that's not actually that interesting. You also have to be a little bit careful, and this is something I'm not very good about, but there is a phenomenon where if you are very successful, some people will come out of the woodwork and be very critical. So if I'm just trying to market my young adult fantasy to young adults, they mostly like my books, and I don't really have to convince them that I'm a neat or interesting guy, and they're not really going to just tear me apart as an author for the way that I'm book marketing. But if, because I also have an author platform, I get people who don't read my genre, but they just want to find out why I'm successful. So they'll take a critical look at all my books, and they might tear them apart for grammar. There might be a little bit of, I don't want to call it jealousy because that makes me seem conceited, but something similar to that where they feel like I don't deserve my success because they don't like the quality of my writing. This is a generalization, but this is just for example, because I do publish pretty quickly. I try to edit as good as I can, but there are going to be a handful of typos or grammar mistakes in my books. I have a lot of things going on, so I'm not totally great at presenting a unified front. For example, one of my books is free. I've made it perma-free, but only on the US store. So in the book, I say, thanks for getting this. This is outdated information, so I'm giving it away for free. But the book isn't free in the UK store. So some people are actually paying for it and then reading the book and noticing that I'm saying it's a free book. And then they get upset because I'm not professional, because I'm not taking care of everything that I need to be taken care of. I probably just make more mistakes than the average author because I'm doing a lot of things quickly rather than trying to do everything perfectly. So if you get too much attention for doing big things or for being successful, you'll inevitably get a backlash of trolls or critics, which is kind of hard to avoid. And the reason why, you have to make a choice. You can either try to play a smaller game, but if you really want to get up to the bigger game where you have more income, you do have to get a little bit famous. And the way to do that is to talk about your success, even if it's like 5K a month. That's very significant income. So if you get to the point where you're making 5K a month, that's something you want to talk about and share, and you can start talking about how you did it, and you'll get more traffic to your site. It's not going to be the right kind of traffic because they're not going to be your ideal readers, but it's still traffic that builds your platform. It's good for the way it works kind of is Google will see how much traffic is going to your website and how many people stay for how much time on your website, and then they'll send you more traffic. So it's always good to get more traffic. It's even sometimes good to get hate traffic, which means for example, I've written some articles on my blog where I didn't think about how controversial they would be. So I got a lot of people who were very angry about the way that I presented some things. And this is I was talking about a movie or a movie review or something. So they didn't like what I was saying. A few people picked it up. They put it on Reddit. I got tons and tons of traffic, but it was all people who hated my message. So I got lots of really angry, irate comments. That feels really terrible. It's not good. I ended up eventually just I severely cut the article short, and I just did a little summary of this is what the article was about, except some people got angry, but this was my main message. I took away all the stuff that was too controversial that I was getting the negative comments for, because I was sick of getting, negative comments. And I still get a lot of traffic to that post, but now it doesn't do anything bad because people who land on that site don't really see anything negative, and I've deleted most of the negative comments. So it's not the end of the world to get hate traffic or to get in trouble or to do something that pisses some people off. You do need to be careful of your platform and your presentation. So it's your website. You have the right to delete comments or to restructure things. Like if you post something that is getting too much heat, you can delete it. You can do lots of things. I would basically say, you don't necessarily want to be controversial and piss people off. On the other hand, it might be better if you are, because if you aren't a little controversial, like if you're just saying things that aren't remarkable, that everybody kind of agrees with, you're not really going to stand out. So I wouldn't say deliberately piss people off or deliberately take risks, but you also shouldn't be overly concerned about how people see you, because you do kind of need to put yourself out there if you want to get to the next level, to get more traffic, to get more fame. Internet fame, it does help sell books. So it does help make personal connections with readers. So it can't really be avoided. Anyways, this is kind of just a video about press releases that got too long, but those are my thoughts. You probably don't need to do it, but it can be a very powerful thing to do if you have a very well crafted message. So if you are in my guerrilla publishing course and you want a quick feedback. If you have an idea for a press release and you want to know what I think about it, or you want to know how you can spin it or pitch it so that it'll get more traffic, I like talking about this stuff. So you can definitely email me and see if I think it's a good idea.